Hey guys, tonight we're diving into a topic so bizarre and unsettling, you'll be glad you're not in ancient China. We're going to talk about ghost marriages, a peculiar practice that's a little less romantic than it sounds. Imagine, for a moment, that you are a parent in a time where your son has died before he could marry. His spirit, it is believed, now roams restlessly, bringing misfortune to your family. The solution: find him a ghostly bride. This isn't some light-hearted, Casper-esque romance. It's a grim, transactional affair built on superstition, duty, and pure dread. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Now, tell me where in the world you're listening from and what time it is for you. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself in a musty antique shop, the air thick with the scent of old paper and forgotten things. Dust motes dance in the single beam of sunlight that cuts through the gloom, illuminating a shelf of scrolls. Most are faded, their ink long since smudged into obscurity, but one in particular catches your eye. It's a wedding scroll, a hunshu, but the paper is a deep, unsettling shade of red, a colour that seems to drink the light as you carefully unfurl it. A chill runs down your spine. The scroll depicts a wedding, but something is terribly wrong. The figures are indistinct, like shadows, and the scene is not of a lively, joyous celebration, but a quiet, sombre procession. One figure, the groom, is an outline, an empty space where a person should be. This is your introduction to the ghost marriage, a practice so deeply ingrained in ancient Chinese belief that it persisted for centuries. A terrifying testament to a world where the living and the dead were never truly separate. The scroll is your key, a macabre invitation into a world of restless spirits, duty-bound families, and the horrifying truth of what it meant to be a bride for the dead. The story you're about to hear is not a fairy tale, it's a transaction. A desperate measure to appease the dead and protect the living from their wrath. You follow the ghostly lines of the scroll, tracing the story of the ghost groom, a young man named Li Wei. He was a scholar, a promising student from a well-to-do family in the Tang dynasty, a golden age of poetry and art. You can almost see him now, a young man with ink-stained fingers and a head full of classics, not a warrior or a general, but a quiet boy with a bright future. His family was proud of him, his path clear. He would pass the imperial examinations, secure a position in the civil service, and marry a respectable woman from a good family. This was the expectation, the natural order of things. But life, as you know, has a habit of subverting expectations. Li Wei, you learn, fell ill, not from a battlefield injury or a sudden fall, but from a simple, insidious fever, in a world without modern medicine. A fever could be a death sentence. You can imagine the frantic family, the worried mother, the frustrated father. They brought in doctors, consulted with herbalists, but nothing worked. You watch as his strength fades, his breath growing shallow, his once bright eyes dimming. The story doesn't dwell on the graphic details. Instead, it focuses on the quiet terror of a family watching their hopes and dreams slip away. The true horror isn't the death itself, but the chilling realization of what it means for the family's future, and for their son's restless spirit. You're a fly on the wall, watching a society grappling with mortality in a way that seems foreign and strange to you now. For them, death was not the end. The soul, or Po, remained tethered to the body and the physical world for a time, and if a person died unmarried, their spirit was destined to wander alone and lonely. This was a fate worse than death itself, not just for the deceased, but for the living family who would suffer the consequences of their son's restless spirit. Crops would fail, livestock would sicken, and other children would fall ill. The family's line would be cursed. The scroll shows a new figure emerging, an old woman with a face like a dried apple, a professional matchmaker. Her role, in this case, isn't to find a wife for a living man, but to find a dead one. The desperation of Li Wei's family is palpable. They are willing to pay any price, to go to any length, to find a suitable partner for their son's spirit. The matchmaker, you see, is a specialist in these macabre affairs. She has a network of informants, a list of deceased single women whose families are also looking for a solution to their own spiritual problems. It's a market, a grim and quiet industry that exists in the shadows of society. It's fascinating, in a deeply unsettling way, how this elaborate social system was built around something so morbid. You begin to notice the modern parallels, the subtle ways this story still echoes today. It's a little like a grim, old-world version of a dating app, but for ghosts. You swipe left on a girl who died of a particularly bad disease, and swipe right on one whose family is willing to pay a high dowry. The humour is dark, a coping mechanism for the deeply uncomfortable reality. The narrative shifts, and you get a glimpse into the home of another family, a poor one this time. You're introduced to the prospective bride, a girl named Mei Lin. The scroll doesn't give you her backstory, but you can imagine it a life of hardship, of hunger, of little hope. Mei Lin died young, from a sudden illness, a fate not uncommon in those times. Her family is grieving but also worried. An unmarried girl's spirit, like a boy's, is a source of bad luck. They need to find a way to appease her, to give her the comfort of a husband in the afterlife. And then the matchmaker arrives, a messenger from the well-to-do Li family, offering a handsome dowry in exchange for their daughter's remains. This is the transactional nature of the ghost marriage laid bare. It's not about love or companionship, it's about appeasing spirits, ensuring the prosperity of the living, and in many cases, securing a financial windfall for the deceased's family. The scroll, you see, is a legal document, a contract. It details the terms of the marriage, the dowry, the rituals, everything. The families are not just performing a ceremony, they are making a binding legal agreement, one that is as important as any marriage between the living. This is a point of debate among modern historians. Was this truly a religious ritual, or was it a socio-economic transaction, disguised as one? The answer, you realise, is probably both. You're standing in the middle of a ritual that feels both ancient and shockingly familiar. The rituals of the ghost marriage are elaborate, mirroring a real wedding in every way, but with a chilling difference. The scroll depicts a sedan chair, a beautiful lacquered red box, but it is empty. Inside, you would imagine, is a spirit tablet, a small wooden plaque with Mei Lin's name and death date on it. This is her, the bride. The sedan chair is carried by men in ceremonial robes, but their faces are solemn, not joyous. The procession is quiet, no music, no laughter, just the shuffling of feet and the rustling of robes. It's a wedding without the celebration, a ritual stripped of all joy and warmth. The sedan chair is brought to the home of the groom's family. A lavish banquet is prepared, a feast fit for the living, but the guests are sombre. The groom, of course, is absent. A rooster, his comb a vibrant red, is used to represent the living bridegroom, a bizarre and slightly comical substitution for the real thing. This small, colourful detail stands out amidst the sombre proceedings, a flash of life in a world of death. The rooster is a stand-in, a symbol of masculine vitality, a way to make the marriage official. You see the bride's spirit tablet being placed on the ancestral altar, right beside the one for the groom. This is the moment they become a couple, a family. The families kowtow, bowing their heads to the ground in reverence. The families are now connected, their destinies intertwined, even though the bride and groom are both dead. The families now share ancestral responsibility, a bond that is considered just as strong as a living marriage. The scroll shows the final moments of the ceremony, the two families sitting down together, sharing a quiet meal. There is no joy in their faces, only a grim, quiet satisfaction that the deal is done, the spirits are appeased, and their families are now safe. The historians still debate the true origin of ghost marriages. Was it born from a genuine belief in restless spirits, or was it a clever solution to a social problem a family with a deceased son needed to secure their line, to ensure their legacy? A family with a deceased daughter needed to secure a dowry and a spiritual home for her. The ghost marriage was a perfect, albeit deeply unsettling, solution to both problems. It was a symbiotic relationship of the most morbid kind. The scroll ends there. The story of Li Wei and Mei Lin's marriage complete. But you are left with a lingering feeling, a sense of unease. The scroll doesn't just tell a story. It's a testament to a world where the lines between life and death were blurry, and where the dead had more influence over the living than you could ever imagine. You've only scratched the surface of this strange and horrifying world, and there is so much more to uncover. But for now, you gently roll the scroll back up, a silent witness to a marriage that was awful in every sense of the word. You can almost hear the quiet shuffle of the sedan bearers, the sombre silence of the wedding banquet, a haunting whisper from a world long gone. You shiver, a chill that has nothing to do with the temperature in the room. You're still holding the scroll, the image of the empty sedan chair lingering in your mind. The story doesn't end there. Of course, the marriage of the dead is only the beginning of a larger, more complex tragedy. As you unroll the scroll further, a new section reveals itself, detailing the life and death of the ghost groom, Li Wei, in greater, more unsettling detail. This is where the story gets truly awful, because you realize it wasn't just about a fever, it was about a future, a legacy, and the brutal weight of filial piety. You are transported back to the Tang dynasty, to a quiet courtyard bathed in the soft glow of a full moon. Young Li Wei is there, not in his deathbed, but in his study. A stack of books piled high around him. You can almost feel the texture of the bamboo slips, smell the ink on the paper. He's a diligent student, a serious boy who takes his duty to his family with the utmost gravity. His father, a minor official, has spent his life savings to ensure Li Wei has the best education possible. The family's entire future, their social standing, their very survival, rests on this boy's shoulders. He must pass the imperial examinations and become a scholar official, a path that would lift his family out of relative obscurity and into a world of comfort and prestige. This is the pressure you feel as you watch him study. A quiet, suffocating weight. It's not just about a job, it's about honour, about family, about 1,000 years of tradition. This level of expectation is a bit like your own student loans, but instead of just having to pay them off, your family's entire existence depends on it. A pretty good comparison. Right. It's a kind of stress you can only imagine. A constant hum of dread in the background of a promising young life. The scroll shows a new detail, one you hadn't noticed before. There is a small, painted figure in the corner of the scroll, a detail so minute you have to squint to see it. It's a young woman, her face partially obscured, but you can tell she is beautiful. This, you realize with a sinking feeling, is not Mei Lin, the ghost bride. This is someone else. This is a living woman, a girl Li Wei was in love with, a girl from a family of no particular standing. You learn her name is Yunqi. You see a brief stolen moment between them. They are standing by a lotus pond, the air thick with the sweet scent of flowers. Their hands brush against each other, a silent promise, a secret shared only between them. Li Wei, for all his seriousness and devotion to his studies, had a secret life, a quiet rebellion. This is the detail that makes his story so much more tragic. His love for Yunxi was a betrayal of his family's hopes, a distraction from his duty. He couldn't marry her. Her family was too poor, her social standing too low. His family would never allow it. He was a pawn in a larger game of social climbing, a piece to be moved on the chessboard of Chinese aristocracy. His future was already planned out, and it did not include love. And here's where the awful part really kicks in. The illness that took Li Wei wasn't just a simple fever. The scroll hints at something else. A quiet despair that slowly ate away at his will to live. He was caught between his duty to his family and his love for Yunxi. The pressure, the conflict, the sheer impossibility of his situation was a kind of sickness in itself. The scroll doesn't say he committed suicide, but it doesn't need to. The imagery of his quiet decline, the fading light in his eyes, is enough. He simply gave up. His spirit crushed under the weight of expectations. His body, weakened by his despair, simply succumbed to the fever. It's a terrible and poignant reality in a world where duty was everything. Love was a luxury he couldn't afford, and it cost him his life. This you realise is a detail that most historians still debate. Was this a common occurrence? Did young men and women in ancient China succumb to despair, their bodies failing them when their hearts were broken? The records are, of course, silent on such matters. Official histories are for the great and powerful, not for the quiet tragedies of a young scholar with a broken heart. The scroll, however, gives you a glimpse into this hidden world of pain and suffering, a world of silent rebellion and quiet desperation. It's a poignant reminder that people, no matter the era, are still just people, with the same desires and fears. The scroll continues, showing the aftermath of Li Wei's death. The grief of his family is palpable, but it's mixed with a deep-seated fear. An unmarried son's spirit is a source of bad luck, a wandering ghost that can bring ruin to the family line. His parents are not just grieving their son, they are terrified of his ghost. This is the cultural context that makes a ghost marriage not just a strange tradition, but a necessary one. It's a way to appease the dead, to give the restless spirit a sense of purpose and belonging in the afterlife. It's a way to save the family from ruin. You watch as his father, a man you now see as a figure of quiet, frustrated desperation, goes to the matchmaker. He's not a villain. You realise he's a victim of a system he can't escape. He's a father who loved his son, but a man who is also bound by the laws of his society, his family's honour, and his own superstitious fears. He gives the matchmaker a detailed list of his son's qualities, his education, his family's standing, his good looks. This is a little bit like writing a Tinder profile, but for a ghost. Promising young scholar, tragically deceased, seeks spiritual partner for a quiet eternity. The humour, as always, is a dark coping mechanism for the grim reality. The scroll then shows the matchmaker, the old woman with the face like a dried apple, going to work. Her job is a little like that of a modern real estate agent, but for a very different kind of property. She has a list of available ghost brides, their families willing to pay, or be paid, for a good match. Her job is to find the perfect spectral partner, a match that will appease both families and, most importantly, the spirits of the dead. It's a surprisingly professional and transactional process, with contracts, dowries, and everything else you'd expect from a real marriage. The scroll focuses on the details of the negotiations. The Li family is wealthy, so they can afford a good match. They are looking for a girl from a decent family, a girl who died young and was of good character. The matchmaker has a few prospects, and she brings the list to the Li family. You see the parents of Li Wei poring over the details of the ghost brides, a grim, sad parody of a real courtship. They are not looking for love. Of course, they are looking for a peaceful and dutiful spirit, a girl who will not bring any trouble to their family. They're looking for a good spiritual investment, a way to secure their future in both this world and the next. One of the most terrible things about this whole process is the lack of humanity. The ghost bride is not a person, she's a commodity, an object to be traded, a solution to a problem. Her life, her story, her dreams are completely erased. The scroll shows the Lee family choosing the ghost bride from a poor family, a girl named Mei Lin, whose parents were willing to accept a generous dowry. The scroll doesn't give you the details of her life, her dreams, or her personality. She's just a name, a date of death, a solution to a problem. This lack of detail is purposeful. You realise it's a way of highlighting the brutal, transactional nature of this whole affair. The ghost bride is a symbol, a stand-in for a woman who could have had a life of her own, but who was instead reduced to a ghost, a spiritual pawn in a larger game. The whole thing is so awful, because it's a story of two people, a boy and a girl, who were both denied a life of their own, one by his own quiet despair, and the other by the circumstances of her birth and death. The ghost marriage is not a happy ending, it's a quiet, sad postscript to two tragically short lives. You're left with a sense of quiet sadness. The scroll, you realise, is not just a historical document. It's a testament to the brutal realities of ancient Chinese society. It's a world where duty was more important than love, where a family's honour was more important than a person's happiness, and where the dead had more influence than you could ever imagine. The ghost marriage, in this context, is not just a strange ritual, it's a necessary evil, a way for people to cope with a world that was awful in its demands and its expectations. You can't help but think about how lucky you are to live in a world where you have some choice over your life, your love, and your destiny. The ghost marriage is a stark reminder of how fragile and precious that freedom is. It's a story of two people who had no choice, who were caught in a web of tradition, superstition, and social expectation, a web that they could not escape, even in death. The scroll unfurls further, and the focus shifts from the ghost groom to the ghost bride. You already know a little about her. Mei Lin, the young woman from the poor family, but the new section of the scroll is dedicated to her, and the details are awful. You are a silent observer in her small, humble home, a place of patched-up walls and a hearth that struggles to keep the cold at bay. Mei Lin is a young woman of simple pleasures, her world defined by the daily chores of grinding grain and weaving cloth. She is not a scholar. Her hands are calloused, her face smudged with soot. Her life is one of quiet struggle, but also of quiet dignity. This is what makes her fate so much more heartbreaking. She wasn't a tragic romantic hero like Li Wei, trapped by his duties and his love. She was a practical, hard-working girl, a daughter who did her best to help her family survive. She had no grand dreams of love or glory. Her dreams were simple: a good harvest, a full belly, maybe a husband from a neighbouring village who would be kind to her. She was a product of her environment, a realist in a world that offered little room for flights of fancy. But even a girl with simple dreams can have her hopes dashed. You see her with a young man from her village, a boy who works in the fields. You learn his name is Hao. Their relationship is not a grand, dramatic romance. It's a quiet courtship of shared glances and whispered words at the village well. It's a sweet, hopeful story, a small pocket of warmth in a cold, hard world. This is the kind of love that could have led to a life, a family, a legacy. This is what makes her ultimate fate so horrifying. The scroll shows a scene of pure, unadulterated tragedy. Mei Lin falls ill. It's a sudden violent fever that takes her quickly. Her family, powerless against the invisible force that is stealing their daughter, can only watch and pray. Her mother wails, a sound that cuts through the silence of the room. Her father, a man hardened by a life of labour, is broken, his shoulders slumped in defeat. There is a sense of helplessness, a feeling of being at the mercy of forces beyond their control. This is the brutal reality of life in ancient China, a world where a simple illness could wipe out a family's hope in an instant. The truly terrible part, however, comes after her death. The family is not just grieving, they are worried. A girl who dies unmarried is a source of great spiritual danger. Her spirit, it is believed, will become a lonely, resentful ghost, a gnu. This ghost would wander the earth, a source of bad luck and misfortune for the living. It could cause droughts, ruin crops, and bring sickness to the family's surviving children. This is the horrifying superstition that drives the family's next action. They must find her a husband in the afterlife. This is a detail that historians still argue about. Was this a genuine, deeply held belief? Or was it a clever way for families to secure a dowry for a daughter who had died before she could be married? The answer, as before, is probably a complex mix of both for Mei Lin's family. The ghost marriage was a way to appease their daughter's spirit, to ensure her happiness in the afterlife, but it was also a way to secure a financial lifeline in a world where a sudden death could mean ruin. The dowry from the ghost marriage was a huge sum, enough to buy food for the family for years, enough to mend the roof, to buy new tools. It was a lifeline in a sea of desperation. The scroll shows the matchmaker arriving at Mei Lin's home. The family is still in mourning, the air thick with grief, but the matchmaker is all business. She speaks of the wealthy Li family, of their deceased son, a scholar with a bright future. She speaks of the generous dowry they are offering, the parents, with heavy hearts. Listen, they are not villains. They are just parents trying to do what is best for their dead daughter and their living family. They see the ghost marriage not as a happy union, but as a tragic necessity, a way to ensure both their daughter's spiritual peace and their own survival. The most miserable part of this whole transaction is the way it erases Mei Lin's personal story. Her quiet love for Hao, her simple dreams, her hard-working spirit, all of it is pushed aside, forgotten. She is no longer Mei Lin, she's a ghost bride, a solution to a problem. Her identity is reduced to a name on a spiritual contract, a pawn in a larger game of social and spiritual diplomacy. You can't help but feel a sense of profound sadness for this girl, who, in life, had so little, and in death, had even less. The scroll then details the process of her transfer. The Li family, as the groom's family, would pay for all the expenses of the funeral and the ghost marriage. They would also provide the dowry. This is an important detail. The ghost marriage was a one-sided affair, with the groom's family holding all the power. They were buying a bride, not just for their son, but for their family, their lineage. You watch as Mei Lin's body is prepared for the final rites, but this isn't the end. The scroll shows a detail that makes your blood run cold, because Mei Lin's parents couldn't afford a proper burial. They had to bury her in a simple, unmarked grave. The Li family, in their desire to secure a proper permanent home for their new daughter-in-law, had her remains exhumed. This is a common practice in ghost marriages, a detail so disturbing you have to take a moment to process it. The families would exhume the remains, and the matchmaker would inspect the bones to ensure they were a good match, a little bit like a ghost medical exam. Right, only much more morbid. The scroll doesn't show the actual exhumation, it just shows the empty, disturbed grave. The implication is enough. Mei Lin, in death, was not allowed to rest in peace. Her body was a commodity, her bones a sign of her worth. She was a possession, a ghost, a spiritual entity to be bought and sold. It's a complete erasure of her personhood, a final, brutal indignity. This is the true horror of the ghost marriage. It wasn't just a ceremony for the dead. It was a transaction that commodified the dead. The families weren't just honouring their ancestors, they were making a business deal. A grim contract that was sealed with the remains of their children. The whole thing is so awful, because it's a story of how a society, in its desperation to control the spiritual world, ended up commodifying and brutalizing the people who inhabited it. You are left with a feeling of profound sadness. The story of Mei Lin, the young, hard-working girl with simple dreams, is a testament to the brutal realities of ancient Chinese society. It's a world where a person's worth was measured not by their character, but by their social standing and their family's wealth. It's a world where a girl's destiny, even in death, was not her own. The ghost marriage was a tragic and terrible solution to a problem that was, at its core, a social and economic one. You gently roll the scroll back up, a silent witness to a tragedy that was as personal as it was historical. The scroll continues, its unrolling a slow, deliberate act that feels like the unwinding of time itself. You've seen the groom's quiet despair and the bride's brutal fate. And now you are a silent guest in the home of the Li family. The air is heavy with a strange mix of grief and relief. Their son, Li Wei, is dead. That is a terrible truth, but the greater terror, the possibility of his restless, unmarried spirit cursing their lineage, has been averted. This is the central conflict you feel as you watch them, a family torn between genuine mourning and the cold, practical demands of their spiritual beliefs. You see Li Wei's father, a man of quiet desperation, and his mother, a woman whose grief is a silent, consuming fire. The scroll depicts them sitting in their lavish home, a stark contrast to Mei Lin's humble dwelling. The house is a testament to their wealth and social standing, but it is now haunted by an absence. A quiet room where a scholar once studied, a garden where a son once walked. Their grief, however, is tempered by a deep-seated fear. They believe, with every fibre of their being, that an unmarried son's spirit is a source of bad luck. The son's soul, or Posan they believe, is trapped between worlds, lonely and resentful. This is a truly awful state of affairs, one that threatens not just their family's prosperity, but their very existence. They believe this because they've seen it happen. The scroll subtly depicts an old, faded painting of a neighbouring family, one that fell into ruin after their son died unmarried. Their crops failed, their business went bankrupt, and their other children fell ill. This serves as a cautionary tale, a social spiritual pressure so profound it leaves no room for debate. The ghost marriage is not an option, it's a necessity, a spiritual insurance policy against a terrifying fate. This is where the story gets uncomfortably modern. Think of it like this: your family's prosperity, your entire future, depends on a single, impossible task. If you don't complete it, everything you hold dear will be destroyed. This is the miserable position the Li family finds themselves in. They are not heartless, but they are terrified. They are not without love for their son, but their fear of his ghost is a powerful motivator. This subtle distinction is crucial to understanding the ghost marriage. It was not a malicious act, but a desperate one born of a complex web of social, economic, and spiritual anxieties. The matchmaker, the old woman you've met before, becomes the central figure in this part of the story. She's a specialist, a kind of ghost realtor. Her job is to find a suitable bride for a ghostly groom. The scroll details her methods, which are both pragmatic and deeply unsettling. She doesn't just look for a girl who has died. She looks for a girl whose family is in a specific social and economic position. She looks for a family that is poor enough to accept a dowry, but not so poor that their daughter's ghost would be seen as a source of bad luck. It's a delicate and terrible balance, a game of grim negotiations and careful social manoeuvring. The Li family's desperation gives the matchmaker immense power. She is the gatekeeper to their spiritual salvation. and she uses this power wisely. The scroll details the negotiations over the dowry, a process that is both a business transaction and a ritualistic exchange. The Lee family is offering a significant amount, enough to lift Mei Lin's family out of poverty. This is the transactional nature of the ghost marriage at its most raw. They are not just buying a bride for their son, they are buying a solution to their spiritual problem, and they are paying a hefty price for it. The horrifying part of this negotiation is the way the two families never meet. All communication is done through the matchmaker, a silent transactional affair that strips the process of any human emotion. The Lee family never meets the parents of their new daughter-in-law, never hears their story, never understands their pain. Mei Lin remains an abstract concept, a name on a spiritual contract, a ghost to be married. This is a deliberate act of dehumanization, a way for the Lai family to distance themselves from the grim reality of what they are doing. They are not marrying their dead son to a dead girl. They are performing a necessary ritual to appease a restless spirit. The scroll shows the contract, a beautiful piece of calligraphy on fine paper. It details the dowry, the names of the two deceased, and the terms of the spiritual union. This document is just as important as a marriage contract between the living. It is a legal and spiritual agreement, a binding promise that will ensure the two ghosts are wedded in the afterlife. The scroll then shows the Lee family preparing for the ceremony. They buy a beautiful red sedan chair, a symbol of a real wedding, but it is empty. They prepare a lavish banquet, but the guests are somber. There is no music, no laughter, just the quiet, shuffling movements of people performing a duty. You realize that the Lee family is not celebrating a wedding. They are performing a ritual to save their family. The ghost marriage, for them, is not a happy occasion, but a tragic necessity, a final, brutal act of love and duty for a son they have lost. The ghost marriage is so disturbing because it is a parody of a real wedding, a hollow echo of a joyous event. It is a ceremony stripped of all joy and warmth, a ritual performed in the shadow of death and fear. This is the profound, unsettling reality of the ghost marriage. It was a practice born of a genuine belief in the power of the dead, but it was also a system that was deeply transactional and dehumanizing. The families involved were not monsters. They were people caught in a web of social and spiritual pressure, doing what they believed was necessary to protect their family. The ghost marriage was a solution, but it was a solution that came with a terrible price, one that cost two young people their dignity, even in death. You're now a part of the eerie and solemn procession. The scroll shows the final moments before the ceremony begins, and you are right there, a quiet observer of the terrible events unfolding. The Lee family's courtyard is transformed, not into a place of celebration, but into a stage for a morbid, theatrical ritual. Red lanterns, typically symbols of good fortune, hang from the eaves, but their light seems to cast long, unsettling shadows. The air is still, heavy with the scent of incense and the unspoken grief of the living. The scroll details the arrival of the wedding sedan, an ornate red and gold palanquin, but it's completely empty. The matchmaker, an old woman with a face like a dried apple, walks in front of it, her expression a mix of professional solemnity and grim satisfaction. This isn't a wedding, it's a grim transaction being finalized. The sedan chair is a mere prop, a symbol of a life that was never lived. The most disturbing part of this scene is the absence of joy, the lack of music, the complete silence of the procession. A real wedding would have gongs, flutes, and raucous laughter. This one has only the shuffling of feet and the rustling of robes, a quiet, almost funereal march. The scroll now shows the climax of the ritual, the moment the two families are finally united through their deceased children. The empty sedan chair is carried into the Lee family's ancestral hall. The hall is the heart of the family, a place where the spirits of the ancestors are honoured and revered. Now, it is the setting for a wedding. It's so awful because it's a violation of a sacred space, a desperate act of appeasement. The centerpiece of the ceremony is the placement of the 2 spiritual tablets. The Li family has a tablet for their son, Li Wei, and the scroll now shows the matchmaker placing a second, smaller tablet next to it. This tablet is for Mei Lin. Her name, her death date, and her clan name are all inscribed on it. This is her, the ghost bride. She is no longer just a name on a contract. She is now a part of this family, a spiritual daughter-in-law. This is a point of debate among modern historians. Was this truly a wedding, or was it an adoption of a spirit? The answer, you realize, is both. The family saw it as a wedding, but in practice, it was a way for the Li family to gain a new spirit to honor, a spirit that would now bring good fortune instead of bad. The ceremony continues, a grim parody of a real wedding. The Li family patriarch bows to the tablets, and the scroll shows him pouring a libation of wine, a traditional offering to the ancestors. He is not just honoring his son, he is welcoming his new daughter-in-law. The 2 families, represented by the matchmaker and the Li family patriarch, exchange a final set of gifts. The dowry is handed over, a small chest full of gold coins and silver ingots, and the scroll shows the face of Mei Lin's father, a man you now know is a mix of grief and relief. He is losing a daughter, but his family is being saved from starvation. It's a tragic exchange, a painful and necessary transaction. The most miserable detail of all comes next. The scroll depicts a small, colourful rooster, its comb a vibrant red, being placed in front of the spiritual tablets. The rooster is a stand-in for the living bridegroom, a symbol of male vitality and life. This is a crucial part of the ceremony, the moment that the marriage is officially consummated in the spiritual world. The rooster is a bizarre and slightly comical detail in an otherwise sombre ceremony. It's a little like a ghostly best man, a small, feathered witness to a wedding that is neither happy nor real. The ceremony culminates with the 2 families, represented by the Li family and the matchmaker, sharing a meal. The banquet is lavish, a feast of roasted meats and fine wines, but the mood is sombre. The guests eating in silence. There is no joyous celebration, no toast to the new couple. The wedding is a transaction, a business deal, and now that it is done, the 2 families can go on with their lives. The ghost marriage has served its purpose. The spirits are appeased, the families are now connected, and the threat of a restless, wandering ghost has been averted. You're left with a profound sense of sadness. The ghost marriage was a solution, but it was a solution that came at a terrible price. 2 young people, Li Wei and Mei Lin, were denied a life of their own and in death. They were used as pawns in a grim game of social and spiritual diplomacy. The ghost marriage was so awful because it was a ceremony that stripped people of their humanity, reducing them to spiritual commodities to be bought and sold. It was a testament to a world where tradition and superstition held a power that you, in your modern world, can only begin to imagine. You gently roll the scroll up, its quiet story a haunting whisper from a world long gone. You have witnessed the full story now. From the first encounter to the grim conclusion, you understand the profound, unsettling reality of what it meant to be a ghost bride, a spiritual pawn in a larger game of social and spiritual survival. You've witnessed the grim, silent culmination of the ghost marriage ritual. The scroll has documented the finality of the transaction, the moment the 2 souls were forever bound in a pact of desperation and superstition. But the story isn't over. As you continue to unfurl the scroll, a new chapter begins, detailing the strange and unsettling life of the Li family after the ghost marriage. This is where the true, long-term, awful consequences of their actions become chillingly clear. The scroll depicts the Li household in the days and weeks following the ceremony. The initial sense of relief is palpable. a collective sigh of a family that has finally averted spiritual disaster. But this relief is short-lived. The house, once filled with the ghosts of unspoken grief, now feels heavier, more silent than before. Li Wei's parents, in their desperation to appease their son's ghost, have brought another into their home, and this ghost, you sense, is not entirely at peace. You are a fly on the wall as you watch the family go about their daily lives, but with a new ritual now, a part of their routine. Each morning, before they eat, they make a small offering of food to the spiritual tablets of their son and their new daughter-in-law. This is a common practice, a way to honour the ancestors, but in this case it feels more like a kind of penance. The scroll shows Li Wei's mother, a woman who once dreamed of a living daughter-in-law, now silently placing a small bowl of rice in front of a wooden tablet. Her face is a mask of quiet sadness, a silent testament to a life that should have been. This daily act, you realise, is a constant, miserable reminder of what she has lost and the lengths she had to go to in order to secure her family's future. The most disturbing part of this section of the scroll is the subtle changes in the family's fortunes. The parents had hoped that the ghost marriage would bring good luck, that their new daughter-in-law's spirit would bring prosperity to their lineage. But the scroll hints at a different reality. The crops on their land do not improve. Their business dealings, once prosperous, become fraught with complications. The family's fortunes, far from improving, seem to stagnate. This is the ultimate, horrifying irony of the ghost marriage. In their quest for spiritual peace, they have only invited more misfortune. This, of course, is a point of academic debate. The historians still argue over whether ghost marriages were truly believed to bring good fortune, or if they were merely a way to placate social anxieties and secure a lineage. The scroll, however, gives you a different perspective. It suggests that the family's misfortunes were not caused by the spirits themselves, but by the psychological weight of their actions. The guilt, the quiet shame, the constant reminder of their dead son and the girl they purchased for him, all of it took a toll on their minds and their actions. The misfortunes, you realise, were self-inflicted, a kind of karmic retribution for their desperate act. The scroll shows the matchmaker returning to the Li household months later, her face a mask of concern. She asks about the family's fortunes, about their health, about the state of their business. The Li family patriarch, his face etched with worry, tells her of their misfortunes. The matchmaker, a pragmatic woman, suggests a new ritual, a new offering, a new way to appease the spirits. This is the true nature of this grim business. You realise it's a never-ending cycle of fear, superstition, and ritual. One ghost marriage is not enough. The spiritual world, in their minds, is a fickle and demanding place, and you must always be vigilant. The most terrible part of this ongoing cycle is the way it erases the individual. Mei Lin, the girl you now feel you know, is completely forgotten. Her story, her quiet dreams, her tragic end, all of it is lost in a sea of ritual and superstition. She is no longer a person, but a spiritual entity, an object to be appeased and honoured. The ghost marriage, in its final, brutal stage, has reduced 2 young lives to a series of rituals and a constant state of fear. You are left with a deep sense of unease. The scroll doesn't end with a neat resolution. It ends with a quiet, lingering question. Did the Li family ever find peace? Did their fortunes ever turn around? Did they ever truly honour the 2 young people they bound together in a desperate, awful marriage? The scroll is silent on these matters, and you are left with the sense that the ghost marriage, far from bringing peace, only brought more turmoil, more quiet suffering, and a deeper, more profound sense of loss. You gently roll the scroll up, a silent witness to a story that, even in its grim finality, feels incomplete. The scroll continues to unspool, its narrative growing more complex, and you are now an invisible witness to the ceremony itself. This isn't the quiet, somber procession you imagined. This is the climax of the ghost marriage, a moment where the living and the dead are meant to brush against one another. The air in the Lee family's ancestral hall is thick with the scent of incense and the unspoken tension of the attendees. This isn't a celebration, it's a terrifying, ritualistic transaction. The most awful part of this ceremony is the sheer theatricality of it all. The scroll depicts the scene with a chilling precision. The Lee family patriarch stands at the altar, a grave expression on his face. He is not just a father honouring his son, he is an actor in a play he desperately hopes will have a good ending. The matchmaker, the old woman who arranged this grim affair, is the stage manager, a figure of silent authority who orchestrates every move. The two spiritual tablets, one for Li Wei and one for Mei Lin, are the lead actors, silent and still. This whole spectacle is a performance for the spirits, a show designed to appease and convince them that the marriage is real. You see the scroll details, the subtle symbolism of the ceremony. The two tablets are placed side by side on the ancestral altar, right in the centre, a position of honour. This is the moment they are officially joined, a powerful symbolic act that is meant to bind their spirits together for eternity. The Lee family patriarch then performs a series of solemn bows, a ritual of deep reverence. He is not just honouring his son, he is welcoming his new daughter-in-law into the family. This is a moment of profound significance, a public declaration that Mei Lin, a girl he never met, a girl from a family he would never have associated with in life, is now a part of his lineage. The scroll then shows the symbolic marriage bed, a lavishly decorated, but empty, bedchamber set up for the ghosts. This is the part that makes your skin crawl. A small, colourful rooster, a symbol of male vitality and life, is placed on one side of the bed, and a small, ceramic doll, a symbol of the bride, is placed on the other. This is the consummation, a grim, silent parody of a real wedding night. It's a moment of profound disturbance, a stark reminder that this is not a wedding, but a ritual, a grotesque imitation of a life that was never lived. The most miserable detail is the quiet understanding between the living. The attendees of this wedding are not happy or joyous. They are sombre, respectful, and slightly terrified. They are not celebrating a union. They are witnessing a desperate act of spiritual appeasement. They believe, with every fibre of their being, that if this ceremony is not done correctly, the consequences will be dire. The two spirits, left to wander alone, would become a source of bad luck and misfortune. The ghost marriage is not a celebration, it's a necessary evil, a last resort against a fate they believe is far worse than a grim wedding. This is a point of debate among modern historians. Was the ghost marriage a genuine belief in the spiritual world? Or was it a clever social construct to address the problem of unmarried sons and daughters? The scroll, in its subtle and terrifying detail, suggests it was both. The people believed in the power of the spirits, but they also used these rituals to solve very real, very human problems of lineage, legacy, and social standing. The ghost marriage was a perfect, albeit terrible, solution to a complex problem. The scroll ends this section with a final, chilling image. The hall is empty, the ceremony is over, and the only thing left are the two spiritual tablets, side by side, in the quiet, empty hall. You are left with a profound sense of sadness and unease. The ghost marriage was not a happy ending for anyone. It was a brutal, transactional affair that stripped two young people of their humanity and left their families with a sense of quiet desperation and fear. The scroll continues, its focus shifting once again, this time to the aftermath of the ghost marriage from a different, and perhaps more brutal, perspective. You are now observing the family of the ghost bride. Mei Lin, a family you know to be poor and struggling. The air in their small, humble home is no longer thick with grief. It is now filled with the palpable, if quiet, relief of having been saved from financial ruin. This is where the story gets awful, because you are forced to confront the harsh reality that for Mei Lin's family. The ghost marriage was less about spiritual peace and more about survival. You see Mei Lin's parents, a man and a woman who have been ground down by a lifetime of hard labour, sitting in their simple home. The matchmaker has just left, leaving them with a small chest full of gold coins and silver ingots. This is the dowry, the price of their daughter's spiritual union. The scroll shows the father's calloused hands trembling as he holds one of the coins, his eyes filled with a mix of sorrow and gratitude. The mother, a woman who had just lost her daughter, is now able to buy food for her other children, to mend the roof of their home, to finally feel a sense of security. This is the miserable truth of the ghost marriage. It was a transaction that came at a terrible price, but for a family on the brink of starvation, it was a price worth paying. The scroll details the family's new life, a life that is, in a way, better than the one they had before. They are no longer living in fear of hunger or the elements. They are no longer constantly struggling to make ends meet. But this newfound comfort is tainted by a profound, unshakable sense of loss and guilt. Mei Lin's name is never spoken. Her memory is a ghost that haunts their home. The family is grateful for the money, but they know exactly where it came from, and they know the price they paid for it. This is the disturbing psychological aftermath of the ghost marriage, a quiet, lingering shame that is more painful than any public mourning. This is a point of academic debate among modern historians. Was the dowry a form of compensation for the loss of a daughter, or was it a form of payment for a spiritual commodity? The scroll, in its grim detail, suggests it was both for Mei Lin's family. The dowry was a lifeline, a way to survive, but for the Li family, it was a business transaction, a payment for a spiritual service. The ghost marriage, in this sense, was a perfect, albeit terrible, example of how a society's beliefs and its economic realities could intertwine in a way that was both pragmatic and deeply dehumanizing. The scroll then shows a brief, poignant scene. Mei Lin's mother is sitting in front of a small, hastily made shrine to her daughter. She is not offering food or incense, a sign that her daughter's spirit has been transferred to the Li family's ancestral hall. Instead, she is holding a small, worn piece of cloth, a remnant of a dress Mei Lin had been weaving before she died. The mother is not mourning a ghost, she is mourning a person, a daughter she had to sell in death to save her living family. This is the ultimate, horrifying irony of the ghost marriage. In their desperate attempt to secure their daughter's spiritual peace, they have severed her from her family, her home, her very identity. You are left with a profound sense of sadness. The story of Mei Lin's family is a testament to the brutal realities of ancient Chinese society. It's a world where a person's life, and their death, was a commodity to be traded, a pawn in a larger game of survival and social standing. The ghost marriage was a solution, but it was a solution that came with a terrible and heartbreaking price. The scroll continues to unspool, its narrative now a blend of history and scholarly debate. You've witnessed the personal tragedies, the social pressures, and the grim rituals, and now you are an observer in a modern library, surrounded by the quiet hum of research. The scroll's final sections are not a continuation of the story, but an academic postscript, a series of notes and interpretations from historians who have studied the phenomenon of ghost marriage. This is where the story gets awful in a different way, because you realise that the lives you've just witnessed are now nothing more than footnotes in a debate. The most prominent question is the one you've been pondering all along. Was the ghost marriage a genuine spiritual belief, or was it a clever social construct? The scroll presents two opposing viewpoints. On one side, there are the traditionalists, who argue that the ghost marriage was a deeply held spiritual practice. They point to the meticulous rituals, the solemnity of the ceremonies, and the genuine fear of restless spirits. For them, the ghost marriage was a way for the living to honour the dead, to ensure their peaceful transition into the afterlife, and to protect their own families from misfortune. This view paints the families not as pragmatic opportunists, but as people who were genuinely trying to do the right thing in a world they believe was filled with unseen dangers. On the other side, there are the revisionists, who argue that the ghost marriage was a social and economic transaction disguised as a spiritual one. They point to the exchange of dowries, the careful negotiation of family status, and the fact that most ghost marriages were between families of different social classes. For them, the ghost marriage was a solution to a very human problem, a way for a wealthy family with a deceased son to secure their lineage, and a way for a poor family with a deceased daughter to secure a financial lifeline. This view paints the families not as spiritual devotees, but as pragmatic actors who were using tradition to solve their problems. This is the miserable truth of the ghost marriage, a system where the living use the dead for their own benefit. The scroll then delves into a more specific and deeply disturbing aspect of the debate, the question of consent. Historians still debate whether the dead were truly consulted in these matters, or if their spirits were simply used as justification for the living's desires. The scroll hints at the use of a spirit medium, a person who would go into a trance and communicate with the deceased, but it also casts doubt on the authenticity of these mediums. Were they truly speaking to the dead, or were they simply telling the families what they wanted to hear? The scroll suggests that the consent of the dead was often a formality, a ritualistic act to legitimize a transaction that had already been decided by the living. This is the horrifying reality of the ghost marriage even in death. A person's free will was not their own. You are left with a profound sense of sadness. The scroll's final sections are not a story of love or loss, but a dry, academic debate about the nature of a ritual that destroyed two young lives. The humanity is gone, replaced by footnotes and scholarly arguments. Li Wei and Mei Lin are no longer people, they are case studies, examples in a debate about tradition, superstition, and social class. This is the ultimate, terrible irony of the ghost marriage in their quest to secure their children's legacy. The living have reduced them to nothing more than historical artifacts. The scroll's final section is not a historical account or an academic debate. It is a terrifying return to the present. You've been so engrossed in the lives of Li Wei and Mei Lin, so lost in the world of ghost marriages and spiritual anxieties, that you've forgotten where you are, the musty antique shop, the single beam of sunlight, the scent of old paper, all of it comes rushing back to you. You are holding the scroll, the very document that told you this awful story, and you realize with a jolt that the scroll itself is the final, chilling piece of the puzzle. The scroll is not just a historical document, it's a terrible artifact of the ghost marriage itself. The red paper, a colour of celebration in life, is a colour of mourning here. The indistinct figures, the empty space where the groom should be, the quiet procession, all of it is a meticulously crafted document of a ritual that was as real as any living marriage. You're holding a contract, a piece of a life that was lived and died, in a world that you can barely comprehend. The final disturbing detail is a small, almost invisible inscription at the very bottom of the scroll. It's a single character, written in a different hand, a more modern hand, a hand that you now realize is your own. The character is a question mark, a symbol of your own confusion and unease, but it's also a question, a silent plea from the past to the future. It's a question about the nature of love, of duty, of death, and of the things that bind us, even when we are gone. You roll the scroll back up. your hands trembling slightly. The story's over, but the feeling lingers. You've been a witness to a tragedy, a silent observer in a world that is both ancient and terribly familiar. The lives of Li Wei and Mei Lin, two young people who were denied a life of their own, are now a part of your own memory. Their quiet despair, their brutal fate, their ghost marriage, all of it is a haunting whisper from a world long gone. You are left with a profound sense of sadness and a lingering question. Are there some things that even death cannot separate? The scroll is now a silent, rolled-up cylinder in your hands. You've closed the book on the ghost marriage of Li Wei and Mei Lin, but the story feels unfinished. The final chapter unwritten. You're still in the dusty antique shop. The sunbeam now a faded memory as dusk settles in. The air is cooler, and a profound sense of unease hangs in the air. You've just witnessed a tragedy of love and duty, but the final, terrible piece of the puzzle is still missing. As you place the scroll back on the shelf, your hand brushes against another object, a small, worn wooden box tucked behind a stack of books. It's an ornate box, but its lacquer is peeling, its corners chipped. A small, almost invisible lock holds it shut. Curiosity gets the better of you, and you use a small, intricate key from your key ring, one that you've had for years but never knew the purpose of, and with a quiet click, the box opens. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded silk, is a small, carefully folded piece of paper. It's not a scroll, not a contract. It's a letter, a personal and private document that has been hidden for centuries. This is the final awful truth, the one that the scroll could not tell. The letter is from Yunxi, the girl Li Wei loved. It is a heartfelt, deeply personal letter, written in a beautiful but shaky hand. It is a letter of love, of hope, and of quiet desperation. She writes of their stolen moments by the lotus pond, of her dreams of a life with him, and of her deep-seated fear of his family's disapproval. She writes of a final, clandestine meeting she had with him just before he fell ill, a meeting where she begged him to run away with her, to escape the suffocating expectations of his family. And in his response, a few lines written on the back of her letter, is the final, miserable twist. Li Wei, torn between his love for her and his duty to his family, had refused. He couldn't abandon his family, his lineage, his future, but he also couldn't bear the thought of a life without her. In his despair, he made a choice. He chose to succumb to his fever, to let go of a life he could not live. The letter doesn't say he committed suicide, but the implication is clear. He chose death over a life of duty without love, and a life of love without honour. This is the ultimate, horrifying irony of his story. He died because he chose to die, not because of a fever, but because of a broken heart. The letter also reveals the final disturbing truth of Mei Lin's story. The matchmaker, in her grim professionalism, had known about Li Wei's secret love. She had a network of informants, and she had used her knowledge to her advantage. She had found a girl, Mei Lin, who was of the same social standing as Yunxi, the girl he loved. The ghost marriage, you realize, was not just about appeasing a restless spirit. It was also a way for the Li family to erase the memory of Yunxi and replace her with a more socially acceptable, if ghostly, alternative. Mei Lin was not just a bride for their son, she was a replacement, a symbolic erasure of a love they couldn't allow. This is the final, brutal truth of the ghost marriage. It was a system that not only commodified the dead, but it also brutalized the living. It was a way for a society to control love, to enforce social norms, and to erase inconvenient truths. The ghost marriage was a solution, but it was a solution that came with a terrible and heartbreaking price. You gently fold the letter, placing it back in the small wooden box. You close the lid. The quiet click, a final punctuation mark on a story that has haunted you. You leave the antique shop. The door closing behind you with a soft sigh. The world outside is dark, and the streetlights cast long, eerie shadows. You walk home, the weight of the story heavy on your mind. You are no longer just a listener. You are a keeper of a secret, a silent witness to a tragedy of love and duty. The awful truth of the ghost marriage is not just in the rituals or the transactions, it's in the quiet, personal tragedies of the people who were caught in its web. It's in the broken heart of a scholar, the brutal fate of a peasant girl, and the desperate actions of a family trying to survive. It's a reminder that some of the most haunting stories are not of monsters or ghosts, but of the quiet, terrible things that people do to each other, all in the name of love, duty, and survival. The world outside is dark, and the streetlights cast long, eerie shadows. You're walking home. The story you've just heard a quiet whisper in your mind. The sounds of the city are a soft hum, a gentle backdrop to your thoughts. The cold wind brushes against your skin, and you pull your coat tighter. The story of Li Wei and Mei Lin is a ghost that will stay with you, a quiet reminder of a world that was both strange and terribly familiar. You are safe now, in your warm, quiet room. The darkness outside is a gentle blanket, and the sounds of the city are a soft lullaby. The story is over. The ghosts have been laid to rest, and you can finally close your eyes. Sleep now, and may your dreams be peaceful.